Managing IT services has always been a challenge, and in fact, as the importance of IT has grown, what organization can survive without IT today, it stands to reason that managing the delivery of IT services is even more important. And as any IT manager knows, it's very difficult to provide the best quality services when you're constantly fighting fires. So a lot of the work in the industry in the last 5 or 10 years particularly is aimed at establishing standards and best practices for the delivery of IT services so that they can be delivered more effectively, more cost effectively, and at higher quality. One of the leading sets of best practices is something called ITIL, or some people refer to it as ITIL or ITIL. ITIL is the IT Infrastructure Library. It's a collection of documents that I'll describe in more detail later that prescribes best practices for all manner of things related to IT services. And it actually covers a fairly broad area, but service management is at the core. A key focus for ITIL is the intersection of people, processes, and technology, and managing all three of those harmoniously and together. There are other standards and best practices. There's something called ISO 20000 from the International Standards Organization. ISO 20000 is derived from ITIL. There's also something called COBIT, which you'll see spelled out on the graphic. COBIT is a set of standards and best practices aimed more at users of IT services. It describes how to specify what you need in the way of IT services. It describes procuring IT services and describes best practices for using and consuming IT services. ITIL began in the UK in the 1980s, so it's almost 20 years old. There was an agency in the UK government called the CCTA, the Central Computer and Telecommunications Authority, that in the 80s was wrestling with all of the issues that IT managers have dealt with for a long time, how to provide good quality services and in a cost-effective manner. So they started writing a collection of documents that became the IT Infrastructure Library. Eventually there were about 30 documents in this first version of ITIL. It grew in volume. Usage was still mostly in the UK government early on. It was actually about 10 years later, mid-90s, before adoption began more widely in other parts of the world, and in fact grew outside of government to commercial organizations as well. In the 90s, CCTA decided to consolidate and created version 2 of ITIL that reduced the 30-plus volumes down to about 8 originally, and ultimately they added a 9th that focused on ITIL implementation for small and medium organizations. In late 2005, the organization in the UK government responsible for ITIL decided another update was required, and so they worked for about a year and a half, and more recently in 2007 published ITIL version 3. The focus throughout is on many areas of IT service delivery, but service management remains at the core. The good news is that the core ideas that the UK government developed 20 years ago still apply. They have evolved. Many outside experts have contributed as well. So what now comprises ITIL version 3 is a very solid, very workable, and very practical set of recommendations for the delivery of IT services. There are 5 core areas for ITIL: problem management and incident management, which at first pass may sound like the same thing, but problem management is about analyzing the root causes for what can go wrong in a network or in a system and putting measures in place to prevent occurrences of problems. Incident management is about what you do when problems do occur. A third area is service desk management. The service desk is the help desk by another name, the function provided by IT staff that involves managing incidents as they occur and managing the communications with users of IT services. The fourth area of importance for ITIL is change management, dealing with rolling out new technology, software release updates, that kind of thing, and doing those in a way that doesn't cause service interruptions. And then the final area of the core set is release management, dealing with software releases and updates to software products that are in use throughout an organization. And there are many other areas: configuration management, performance management, security management, even financial management. All those are aspects that are covered by ITIL as well. In fact, ITIL is used widely these days outside of government. Fortunately, this is not a case of that old axiom, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, and people run the other way. The fundamental ideas of ITIL are solid. They were solid 20 years ago. They are now. And as I mentioned earlier, there have been lots of outside experts who've contributed significantly to the growth and evolution of ITIL. In terms of examples of commercial use, organizations as diverse as Microsoft, which uses ITIL practices extensively internally in their networks and their systems, British Airways, Procter & Gamble, or just a couple of examples of commercial organizations. If you go on the web and do a search for ITIL users, you'll find many user groups for ITIL. So there's a lot of the collaboration and support from different companies to each other for use of ITIL. Another example of ITIL usage in a commercial organization is a project the Harvard Computing Group was involved with last year. The project involved the greenfield creation of a bank, a brand new bank created in the Middle East, and from the outset, the IT architects decided that ITIL, and more specifically ISO 20000, would be the guiding set of principles around which the entire IT infrastructure would be built. So every step of the way, ISO 20000 and ITIL were core principles in guiding hardware selection, software selection, network design, staffing, every other aspect of the creation of the IT infrastructure for this bank. For anyone interested in learning more about ITIL, there are many training programs available. In fact, there are almost too many. If you look on the web, you'll find places you've never heard of that offer ITIL, and you can even make a guess. If you just pick a domain name like itiltraining.com, guess what? It exists. Or itil-training.net, that exists as well. I'm not vouching for the reputation of any of those organizations, but they're widespread and they do exist. There are many universities that offer training. Here in this local area, Boston University has a long time history in providing corporate education, and they too provide ITIL training and ITIL certification programs. Now, as far as certification is concerned, there are a set of certification requirements to become an ITIL consultant, and many of the training programs are designed specifically to lead people in that direction. Not everyone who wants training on ITIL wants to be an ITIL certified consultant, but it's a natural outgrowth for many people. Microsoft has had a heavy involvement with ITIL for internal use in their networks and computer systems for years. They've also turned that knowledge around and published documentation for users of Microsoft products who are interested in implementing ITIL best practices. In particular, Microsoft publishes something called the Microsoft Operations Framework, and it's evolved up through 4 versions now. It's readily available at the Microsoft website for anyone interested in more detail. Their particular approach was to take the general concepts of ITIL and apply them in practical terms. So naturally, you'll find lots of Microsoft products mentioned in these Microsoft Operations Framework documents, but even withstanding that, there is lots of good, solid, practical information. One of the things our company has done is to create process maps based on some of the Microsoft Operations Framework documents. So for people interested in knowing about ITIL service management or release management or problem management, for example, we have process maps that we've pre-built based on the ITIL specifications augmented by the Microsoft Operations Framework documents. The first thing to do if you want to implement ITIL is to realize that implementing ITIL is not a monolithic thing. It's not an event. It's a process in and of itself. So you'll start with particular areas that are of consequence for you, and you'll move on to others. So think about implementing ITIL as a long-term process. Look at what you need to do first, and then make plans for second and third and fourth and so forth. You may need to bring outside expertise to bear to help you get your ITIL implementation off and running. You may decide that you can do it yourself, but either way, think of it as a process, and one that will require you to go back and revisit some of what you've done initially as you get further along. You may need to change some of the things you've done for configuration management as you get into change management, for example. Implementing ITIL is a daunting challenge. It's one that you should undertake because you appreciate what you're going to get out of it in the end. You're looking for more effective IT operations. You're looking for better managed IT service delivery. You're looking for lower cost total ownership or total cost of ownership for implementation of IT hardware, software, and services. So the goals are entirely worthwhile. What you need to do is think about both the training, but also think about the mindset changes that are required for you and your staff. Everyone in the IT department needs to have a new focus on service quality, service management, and service delivery. If you can help your staff achieve that, then you'll be a long way toward implementing more effective services and service management.